On today's Locked On Giants podcast, we take a look at the best and the worst of New York Giants drafts so far this century. That's coming your way next here on Locked On Giants.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily New York Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, New York Giant fans, and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast family, your team every day. I'm your host, Patricia Traina, credential member of the New York Giants media for Locked On, as well as for New York Giants on SI, which is where you can find all my written work. And as always, welcome on into my Blue Crew community members, my everydayers, my newcomers, and everybody in between. Thank you so much for spending part of your day with us here on the Locked On Giants podcast, making us your first listen of the day. And today's episode of Locked On Giants is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $250 in bonus bets when their first $5 bet wins. Visit FanDuel.com today to get started. All right, Giant fans, I thought we would do something fun on today's show. You know, the draft is as I record this, it's a couple days away. It'll be here before we know it. We'll have answers finally. So rather than do another mock draft, rather than, talk about rumors that can change in a New York minute, I thought we would take a walk back through history and look at the best and worst of Giants drafts of years past. So some criteria that I'm going to lay down for you. Most, if not all of these picks that I made were from 2000 onward. All right. I didn't want to go too far back in history. I wanted to keep it fairly recent. And the three categories that I covered in this podcast are going to be best day 3 picks, worst round 1 picks, and the best trades. Now, some of them you're going to probably be able to guess what they are before I even get to them. But let's go ahead. Let's have some fun. And I'm curious to hear what you guys and gals think. If you agree with the picks that I make, if you disagree, if you're watching on YouTube, make sure you pop a comment in the box below and let me know what you think. If you're listening on audio, you can reach out to me and let me know what you think. I'm always interested in hearing that. So let's get into it. We're going to start off with the best picks on day 3. So why did I pick day 3? Well, day 3 is probably one of the hardest ones for a team to forecast. All right. It's basically a hit or miss. So, a lot of times you get developmental guys who they come along, they contribute to the team, but they don't really make an impact in terms of, like you would expect from a day 1 or a day 2 pick. But I have picked out 3 guys. Now there are more, but for the sake of fitting everything in, I've only picked out 3 for this particular segment that I think are the best day 3 picks since we'd have to go back actually recently, since 2005 onward. All right. So let's kick that off. My first day 3 pick that I think was just an absolute steal for the Giants. He was a 4th round pick in 2005, pick number 110 overall, running back Brandon Jacobs. All right. Brandon Jacobs, 1/2 of the Earth, Wind. Well, actually, it was 1/3 of the Earth, Wind, and Fire trio that the Giants would later have, with Ahmad Bradshaw. It was just an amazing trio. But let's talk about Brandon specifically. So when Brandon came in, and I'll never forget the first time I met him as a rookie, how he was sitting on his stool, kind of minding his own business. And I went up to him to introduce myself, and he just greeted me with a big hi, just very animated, hi, so I'll never forget that. Brandon's always been one of my guys, and I think the world of him. But anyway, Brandon Jacobs, when he was first brought in, that was at the tail end of the Tiki Barber era. And Brandon Jacobs was primarily a short yardage and goal line guy because he was just so big. He was 6'4", like 260 pounds. I mean, he was a bruiser. He was the type who would wear you down if you were on the defense with his ground and pound style of play. And he did a lot of wearing down of defenses in his time, let me tell you. So over the course of from 2006 onward, 2006 is when he really, went into the starting lineup, because I think that's when Tiki Barber had called it quits. Brandon Jacobs from 2006 for the next like 5 seasons, 4,327 yards on the ground, 40 touchdowns. Okay. And he averaged 4.5 yards per carry over that 5-year stretch starting in 2006. He was instrumental in helping the team win 2 Super Bowls. And he finished his Giants career with 60. Actually, he finished his NFL career, because he had like 2 games with the 49ers before he came back to the Giants. He finished with 60 rushing touchdowns, which was a franchise record at the time. He had 2 1,000-yard seasons in 2007 and 2008. And again, just an absolute bruising force as a runner. And unfortunately for him, knee injuries got him. So by the time he had his second tenure with the Giants, he wasn't quite the same. Unfortunately, Father Time and injuries caught up with him. But in his heyday, Brandon Jacobs was quite the runner. And I think one of the best day 3 picks that the Giants had made since the 2000s. All right. Pick number 2 for me, Ahmad Bradshaw. All right, running back. Round 7, number 250 overall. Again, 2007. Ahmad Bradshaw, if you remember, he was supposed to go higher in the draft. But because of concerns that popped up during the draft process, Bradshaw's stock slipped. All right, there were all kinds of concerns with the off-field issues with him, so he slipped down to the 7th round. But you know what? Probably one of the best 7th round picks the Giants made in the 2000s. He had 2 1,000-yard rushing seasons, that in 2010 and 2012. He was a multi-purpose back, so he could slash and dash out of the backfield, but he was also a good receiver out of the backfield. He had 2 Super Bowl championships. All right. So he was instrumental in contributing to those. And his best year was 2010, when he was in the top 10 league wide in rushing attempts, yards, and overall touches. All right. So Ahmad Bradshaw, the Giants got super value out of that 7th round pick. And again, a guy that probably should have gone higher in the draft, but because of the off-field concerns and some other issues, Ahmad Bradshaw slipped down to the 7th round. Now, again, like Brandon Jacobs, unfortunately, injuries caught up with Ahmad Bradshaw, and just wasn't the same towards the end of his career, but still pretty good runner. And, he and Brandon Jacobs used to have lockers next to each other. So, it was like big brother and little brother. And it was just really nice to see the interaction between the two. And, I like Ahmad Bradshaw too. He was another one of my guys that I was very fond of back in that era. So Ahmad Bradshaw, number 2 on my list of best day 3 picks. All right, number 3. This one was tough. I thought about Darius Slayton. Darius Slayton has always been kind of an underrated day 3 pick, but I went with Barry Cofield, defensive tackle, chosen in round 4 of the 2006 draft. Barry Cofield, kind of like Dexter Lawrence, has, until recently at any rate, was durable. Barry Cofield only missed 1 game. He started right away as a rookie. Didn't quite have the career that Dexter Lawrence is having right now, but I'm talking in terms of durability and reliability and stepping into the starting lineup from day 1. Barry Cofield had 10.5 sacks in 6 years for the Giants, 211 tackles, 27 tackles for loss, 22 quarterback hits. All right. He was just, an underrated member, I thought, of that defensive front. And again, good value there. He led the Giants defensive line as a rookie with 67 tackles. And I don't know if you guys remember, but Barry Cofield had that taser sack dance that he kind of, I don't know if he invented it, but it was this taser sack dance. And it almost, in the beginning, kind of reminded me of what Dexter Lawrence does, but Dexter Lawrence puts a little bit more, groove and movement into his sack celebration dance. But Barry Cofield, to me, was a very underrated day 3 draft pick who was very good for the Giants in the middle there, a big body guy, a run stuffer who had some movement and just, was a contributor to the Giant defenses. So Barry Cofield will be my 3rd pick for the best day 3 picks. So I've only picked 3 for day 3, but those are my 3: Brandon Jacobs, Ahmad Bradshaw, and Barry Cofield. All right, coming up next, we'll get it out of the way. The worst first round draft picks. I think a lot of you probably know who's going to be on the list. Maybe you do, maybe you don't, but we will talk about it right after this. Hey, Giant fans, the NBA playoffs are here, and FanDuel is giving new customers an incredible way to get in on the action. Right now, new customers can get $250 in bonus bets when their first $5 bet wins. From three-pointers to steals to assists, FanDuel has so many ways to bet on your favorite player props. Plus, after the game tips off, you can even combine live props bets into a same-game parlay for a chance to win big. So don't miss out. Head on over to fanduel.com and claim your $250 in bonus bets today. All right, Giant fans, welcome back to the Locked On Giants podcast. I'm your host, Patricia Traina, and we are looking at the best and worst of the New York Giants drafts, basically from 2000 onward. I didn't want to go too far back in history because I know we have a lot of younger viewers who maybe don't remember some of the players. I mean, it still kind of blows my mind that sometimes, people write into me and they say, oh, I never saw Lawrence Taylor play. And I'm like, boy, did you miss out on a treat. Watching Lawrence Taylor play back in the day was quite the treat. But, so I tried to keep it recent with some of these picks. So, obviously Rocky Thompson, who, in this next category of worst round 1 picks, Rocky Thompson, I think a lot of people of my age bracket and older are probably going to say that's got to be number 1 on the list, but he's not on the list. Let's get it started for this segment. Top of my list. Now, I don't go in chronological order. I just go based on the absolute biggest disasters. And my top pick here for the worst Giants draft pick, this was a toss-up. And I went with Kadarius Toney, all right? 2021, the 20th overall pick. That was the year, if you remember, Dave Gettleman traded down from number 11 because he picked up the extra first-round pick, which, at the time I applauded. I think a lot of people applauded, to give them 2 first-round picks the year afterwards. But they passed up Micah Parsons. So, that I didn't particularly care for, but I understood what they were trying to do at the time. But Kadarius Toney, that was a guy that, if I remember correctly, when I was doing my mock drafts and my quote-unquote big boards, I had Toney in the second round. I did not have him as a first-round pick. Well, Toney came in, and I don't know what it was with him, but right from the get-go, it was one thing after another. And, the case what I think a lot of these guys that are on this particular list was maturity. All right. And I've got several here that I'm going to talk about, but Toney was maturity. He basically didn't want to be in New York. He was outspoken. And then when you had the change in coaching staff from Joe Judge, who basically, banged the table for him, and then, Brian Dable and Joe Shane came in the following year, they weren't going to put up with his stuff. Sometimes with guys who maybe are need a little bit more management, a head coach will say, hey, I can work with him. I've got a connection with him. Then that head coach goes away, and then things fall apart. Well, Toney didn't last with the Giants. As far as I'm concerned, he's one of the biggest busts of the 2000s for the Giants. All right. 1A on my list as biggest bust. 2015, 9th overall pick, offensive tackle Eric Flowers. Now, Eric Flowers, interestingly, went on to find success outside of New York. So for whatever the reason, the guy just didn't take to the New York market. And look, the New York market is not for everybody. It takes a special kind of demeanor. And again, it takes maturity to make it in New York. The old Frank Sinatra song, if I can make it here, I can make it anywhere. So Eric Flowers, the Giants had hoped they would have their left tackle of the next decade. Didn't work out. Eric Flowers wasn't coachable. He was kind of on the surly side. And it was just inevitable after a while that, he wasn't going to last with the team, which he didn't. So, all right. The next one on my list, 2016, again, a top 10 pick. He was number 10 overall. Cornerback Eli Apple out of, I believe he was Ohio State. Eli Apple that year, I always got the sense that was a panic pick. Again, I had Eli Apple. I distinctly remember having him as a second rounder on my board. He went in the first round, and I think that was the year where they just kind of panicked because they had two guys in mind, I think, that were being rumored that year that the Giants were looking for, and it got out, and teams jumped them for those guys, so they went with Eli Apple. And again, the problem with Eli Apple, just like what as was the case with Eric Flowers and with Kadarius Toney, maturity. Eli Apple just, for whatever reason, didn't want to put in the work at the time. His teammates began calling him out. Landon Collins called him a cancer, I think, at one point. And, Eli Apple ended up getting suspended for conduct detrimental to the team before the Giants shipped him out of here to New Orleans in exchange for 2 draft picks. So Eli Apple, I thought, had talent, but for whatever the reason, it just never manifested and never developed. And part of that, again, is with the player. The player's got to want it. The player's got to want to be coachable. The player's going to want to put in the work. And Eli Apple, for whatever reason, just didn't pan out, whether it was, the coaching, whether it was just him, whether it just wasn't a fit, it didn't work out. So he was not, he goes on the list of the worst first round picks for the Giants in 2000. All right, couple more. This is an oldie but goodie. Defensive tackle William Joseph, 2003, 25th overall pick. I remember this one very well. William Joseph that year came into training camp late. I remember because we were up in Albany, and he reported to camp the night before the Giants and the Jets were supposed to have a scrimmage. And William Joseph came in, and I don't think he was ready to practice for a couple of days, which right off the bat was a red flag. People were like, well, what kind of condition have you been keeping yourself in? He came in late because of a contract dispute back in those days. They didn't have the slotting like they do now for the draft. So William Joseph came in, and he played the full season that year. But overall, for a first round pick, he started only 17 of the 69 games he appeared in for the Giants. Only mustered up 7.5 sacks, 88 tackles, 5 quarterback hits. William Joseph just wasn't a good pick. So, that just not a good return on their investment by the Giants in William Joseph. Okay, I'm going to give you one more. This is actually a pick that was made at the late 1990s. So this is the only, draft pick that is outside of the 2000s, but I think some of you will remember him. Cedric Jones, defensive end. He was the Giants pick in 1996. He was picked 5th overall in that draft class. Now, a little bit of history behind that particular pick. Cedric Jones was not supposed to be the Giants' pick. The Giants that year had their eye on Jonathan Ogden, offensive lineman, who went 1 pick before to the Baltimore Ravens. And I remember being in the old Giant Stadium press room for the draft, and we were joking because when the Ravens were on the clock and they announced that pick, we heard a big thud up, outside of the room. I'm not sure where it was, but the joke was at the time that George Young, the GM, had fainted because he was just so, wanting Jonathan Ogden at, in that particular draft. And the Ravens came in and they swooped him up. And Jonathan Ogden went on to become a Pro Football Hall of Famer, a Pro Bowler, an all-world offensive tackle. Cedric Jones, he appeared in 73 games for the Giants, 15 sacks. Let me see. He was part of the 2000 Super Bowl team, the only Giants Super Bowl team that didn't win. That was Super Bowl 35. And in that postseason, by the way, 3 games played, and Cedric Jones posted 3 tackles and 1 fumble recovery. Had a quiet, playoff. So basically 5 years, and Cedric Jones just wasn't the impact player that you would like to think a first round, defensive player would be, or a first round pick would be. And that was the class, by the way. Simeon Rice went number 3 to the Cardinals. Keyshawn Johnson was the number 1 pick overall, the wide receiver. Kevin Hardy, a linebacker, went to the Jaguars that year. Giants went with Cedric Jones. And I still don't know, what they were thinking there, but it is what it is. I mean, they would have been better off, I think, Willie Anderson, offensive tackle, who I want to say went to the Bengals at number 10. That would have been my pick. If you didn't get Jonathan Ogden, why not take Willie Anderson there? But the Giants didn't. We all know the story. It is what it is. So, anyway, that's my list of worst first round picks for the New York Giants. Now, in the next segment, we're going to get back to the positives and we're going to talk about the 3 best draft trades the Giants have made. And these are all in the 2000s, by the way. So, that is coming up right after this. Hey, Giant fans, did you know your Fire TV is also an Xbox? Turn any TV into your gaming and entertainment hub with Fire TV Stick 4K devices. No console required. Just grab your paired controller, subscribe, or sign into Xbox Game Pass Ultimate with EA Play included, and you're ready to play. Dive into hundreds of premium titles from EA Sports College Football 25 to Call of Duty Black Ops and Avowed, and as easily as you'll stream your favorite TV shows. It's gaming made simple, and it's all on your Fire for TV. With Wi-Fi 6/6E and auto low latency mode advanced technology, Fire TV Stick 4K delivers smoother, more responsive gameplay with lightning fast speeds you need to stay competitive. And you get endless entertainment thanks to 4K streaming that gives you smooth access to more than 1.5 million movies and TV episodes from your favorite subscribe services like Netflix, Prime Video, Disney Plus, Max, and more. So go on and head over to Amazon.com/Fire TV Locked On to get started. Xbox Game Pass Ultimate subscription and compatible controller required. Available on select devices, including Fire TV Stick 4K 2nd Gen, Fire TV Stick 4K Max 1st and 2nd Gen, and Fire TV Cube 3rd Gen. All right, Giant fans, welcome back to the Locked On Giants podcast. I'm your host, Patricia Traina. We are doing the best and worst of the New York Giants drafts. Most of these picks, obviously, are from 2000 on. I had to throw one in from the late 1990s, though. And, before we get into the best trades that the Giants have made, and I'm sure a lot of these you're going to know, but before we get into that, what's coming up on the Locked On Giants podcast? So I'm going to have a show for you tomorrow for Thursday before the draft, kind of like a pre-draft wrap-up, if you will. Then Thursday night, obviously, I will do a reaction show as soon as I possibly can about the Giants' first-round activity. We'll talk about, best available for day 2. So we'll just keep the content flowing for you all, weekend long with the draft coming up. It's going to be an exciting time. And then down the line, I'm hoping for next week, we'll see if we can't get some of the Locked On college hosts who cover the picks, their schools. We'll see if we can't get them on. We'll see if we can't get some of the college coaches of the picks on the program. So I'll work on all that for you as we continue to bring you 5 days a week coverage here on the Locked On Giants podcast. All right, let's wrap things up with the best trades the Giants have made on draft weekend. Number 1, I mean, come on. Do I have to really say it? The best trade the Giants have made in the 2000s, probably ever for that matter. Eli Manning, 2004. All right, now, Eli Manning, for those of you who don't remember the trade, he was the first overall pick by the then San Diego Chargers. Manning did not want to play for San Diego. He wanted to play for the Giants. And I remember catching wind of that possibility that the Giants were very interested in getting Manning that year. I remember catching it. One of the players' wives at the time told me that that's how, what she was hearing from her husband. So I knew that, like in February, that was going to be the possibility. So anyway, the Chargers ended up taking Manning. The Giants, who had the 4th overall pick that year, took Phillip Rivers. They did not want Phillip Rivers. Had that trade for Eli Manning not worked out, the Giants probably would have gone with Ben Roethlisberger at that spot. But Ernie Accorsi, and I know this because he spoke to me for my book. You can, if those of you watching on video, you can see my title behind me. Ernie Accorsi said it was a little touch and go there in the beginning, but once he was confident that the trade was going to happen, and he knew that the Chargers would accept Phillip Rivers over Ben Roethlisberger, the deal was made. So that deal ended up being Rivers going to the Chargers, the Giants' 3rd-round pick in that 2004 draft, and then in 2005, round 1 and round 5. All right, so that 2005 class, the Giants only had 4 picks in that class, but 3 of them went on to become, solid contributors for the Giants. So Eli Manning, we know his credentials: 2 Super Bowl victories. He holds every passing record that the team, in franchise history. I don't think there's any dispute that that was probably the best draft trade that the Giants have made ever. All right, in their 100-year history, I would say. All right, trade number 2, Jeremy Shockey, tight end. This trade was done in 2002, and the Giants basically had to trade up 1 spot to get Jeremy Shockey. So at the time, they sent the 2002 4th rounder to the pick, and their 1st-round pick, which was number 15, to the Titans. The Giants moved up 1 spot. They took Jeremy Shockey, who at the time was one of the premier picks in that particular class. And Shockey, what did he do? He went on to have 4 Pro Bowls as a Giant. He was an All-Pro in one of his seasons. He was a offensive rookie. I'm sorry, 2nd place for offensive rookie of the year. That year, that first year. Started 82 of 83 games, 371 receptions, 4,228 yards, 27 touchdowns. Sadly, Shockey didn't spend his entire year with the Giants. Again, you had a change in coaching staff. And this is the danger with changing coaching staffs. Sometimes, one coaching staff will have a vision for how they utilize a specific player and their skill set, and then a new staff comes in, and it's a totally different version. So Shockey was drafted when Jim Fossil was the head coach, and he probably had his best years under Fossil. Then Tom Coughlin came in, and things kind of changed a little bit with how they deployed Shockey, and he wasn't as effective as he was, earlier in his career. Ultimately, he ended up getting traded away. And it just, wasn't a happy ending, unfortunately, for Jeremy Shockey and the Giants, but still, a good trade for the Giants at the time, considering, what they were able to get. All right, one more for you. This one came in 2015, and my pick is safety Landon Collins. Right now, in that year, the Giants traded up 8 spots in round 2 to the top of that round. Right? Landon Collins was a guy on whom the Giants had a 1st-round draft grade. Collins slid out of the 1st round that year, obviously. The Giants wanted him badly. All right. And I can't remember who the other team was that wanted him, but there was a team in front of the Giants in the 2nd round that there was rumblings that they wanted Landon Collins as well. So the Giants sent, their 2nd round pick, which was number 40 overall, their 4th round pick, 108 overall, and a 7th round pick, 245 overall, to move up 8 spots to the top of round 2, where they got Landon Collins, safety. All right, what did Landon Collins give them? In 5 years, he made 3 consecutive Pro Bowls. All right, he was an All-Pro in 2016, and he finished in 3rd place, Defensive Player of the Year honors. Landon Collins was a great addition, and he was a guy, if you remember, he didn't want to leave the Giants. At the time, he signed that big deal with the Washington Commanders because Dave Gettleman, the GM, for whatever reason, just didn't want to spend the money on Landon Collins. Now, ultimately, Landon Collins came back to the Giants, but as is the case with a lot of guys, father time takes their toll on them. They're not the same as they were the first time around. Landon was decent enough for them, but afterwards they just kind of moved on. So, it's a shame he couldn't spend his entire career as a Giant. That's a guy you would have liked to have seen spend his entire career as a Giant. But, Landon was also a captain for the Giants. He was well liked in the locker room, well respected. He gave you his all. I mean, he kind of, when Xavier McKinney came along, Xavier kind of reminded me of Landon in a lot of ways. Landon, I think, was a little bit better player than Xavier at the time in his heyday, but just a demeanor and that whole attitude and want to. And Landon Collins, just I think one of the best trades that the Giants made during draft weekend. So that being said, that will wrap up that segment. And before we say goodbye, who's going to be the draft trade that we'll be talking about down the line, if there will be one? Who's going to be the worst pick, if there is one, that we'll be talking about down the line? Who's going to be the best day 3 pick that we'll be talking about down the line? We are going to find out starting Thursday, and I can't wait to bring you that coverage, Giant fans. Mock draft season's over. We're going to get answers. It's going to be exciting, and I hope you will keep it here on the Locked On Giants podcast. That's going to do it for this edition. Again, I want to thank you so much for spending part of your day with us here on Locked On Giants. Don't forget, check out Locked On NFL Draft. Damian Parson, Keith Sanchez, they're doing a great job over there talking about the picks, the intel that they're getting. They're going to do wrap-ups. They're going to do so much coverage. So if you can't get enough NFL Draft coverage, you will want to check those two guys out. Locked On NFL Draft, wherever you get your podcasts, including here on YouTube. All right, Giant fans, that's going to do it. I'll see you tomorrow.